Also on the Kenya-Somalia border dispute that is still escalating and taking now a different dimension as well. Will we as a country be a landlocked country if this particular dispute continues? That is another probing question that people are asking right now. But we want to hear from our expert this morning. Let's just begin first of all with what is happening in Ethiopia, because that is bound to also affect our security as well, because people are holding Ethiopia as the figure of stability, especially in the Horn of Africa, as it is right now. Now, if it goes out of kilter right now with these suicide attempts, not just suicide, but the coup attempt as well, what will happen, or what does it portend for the security of our nation as well? And I want to introduce our panelists this morning. We are joined by Erastus Mwencha, Ambassador Erastus Mwencha. He is the chair of He's a former deputy chair of the African Union. And also we are joined by Dr. Mustafa Yusuf Ali, who is a conflict and resolution expert and also a national security commentator. And also we are joined by Peter Kagwanja, who is the CEO of African Policy Institute as well, to just give us a raft of understanding or issues that we'll be discussing here, to give us a confluence, or maybe to just try and conflate them together so that we can get a better understanding on what is happening regionally so far. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Deba.
Right, let's just begin first of all with what is happening with Kenya and Somalia, of course, row, and what does it portend? Because now information that we have is this, that we are facing a situation where the country can be landlocked because of this particular dispute that now is ongoing. We are still at the International Court of Justice as well. So let's just hear first of all from your understanding, Ambassador Erastus Mwencha. Are we likely to face this situation if it goes on?
Well, I wouldn't be that pessimistic, but of course it's a very serious situation. And as you know, that the International Court of Justice has now set a date for hearing, 13th of September.
13th of September?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And if that be the case, then the court in its own wisdom will find a way of, making sure that these countries, there is either win-win, or if there is a dispute is escalated, then it's going to drag out for a long time to come. Mm-hmm. And I don't know whether there will be any need of any diplomatic moves now that the court has come in. CS Monica Chuma was meeting Parliament the other day, and of course she made a presentation in camera. So we don't know what that comes out with. But to me, I can see that yes, this matter is now gone out of, as I would say, the genie is out of the bottle. Mm-hmm. We have to manage the crisis. And managing the crisis may mean, and I think that was a right move that Parliament and the CS took, that let's not talk too much, let's not escalate the matter, let's the due process then go ahead. If we are able then to convince Somalia that we take the matter out of the court, mm-hmm. because to me, that is where we should have been. Mm-hmm. This is not a matter that should be settled in the court, because the court, there will be a loser and a winner. But if it's out, normally mediation is a better option. Mm-hmm. And let's hope that Somalia will accept that option. I hope this is the trend, this is a line that we're going to take in the meantime.
All right. Dr. Mustafa.
Yeah, Dibal, if the question is Kenya going to be landlocked, will Kenya have a shoreline? Yes, it will still continue to have a shoreline if ICJ gives that maritime waters to Somalia. Will that affect Kenya's maritime ownership and the entry of ships into the ports of Mombasa and Lamu without any problem? That is where the problem is, that if ICJ is going to award that waters to Somalia, then on the outer limits of the continental shelf, that is 350 nautical miles, mm-hmm. then you see that line that is coming down, and the one that is from Somalia, that Somalia claims, and the one that starts from down in Shimoni going on a straight line with Tanzania. They meet actually somewhere around 300 nautical miles of the continental shelf. This means that any ship that is coming to dock in the port of Mombasa and Lamu, if ICJ is going to award Somalia that territory, that ship will need to seek permission from, or will need to inform Somalia or Tanzania that they are coming into the country. So in that respect, yes, and that's where it complicates maritime trade for Kenya. Kenya will still have the shoreline, the 12 nautical miles, the 200 miles EEZ, the exclusive economic zone, except that I think 24-25% of that will be taken. But on the outer limits, the continental shelf, then that's where the problem is going to be for Kenya. And I guess, and this is what we have consistently been saying, that this problem can be resolved bilaterally between Kenya and Somalia, and we encourage the two countries to negotiate, and we also encourage Somalia to take this case out of ICJ.
All right, so let's hear from Peter Kagwanja on this. The issue has been on the equidistant and also the parallel principle. That is the biggest now two options that we do have so far. How will these two sort of approaches maybe impact Kenya negatively or positively?
The first problem we have here, and why this issue has become such a sensational issue and aroused a lot of emotions, is because there is little trust, particularly from the African side, not Kenya alone, on international, justice systems, because it's literally a civilizational question. And now the equidistant principle, where lines or rather imaginary lines across waters, as opposed to run 35 degrees from the mainland, has been applied widely in the Caspian Sea. And if you don't apply that rule in the Caspian Sea, then many countries will not have an outlet to the Mediterranean, finally to the wide open sea. So for other countries, run like that so that you can get an outlet into the sea. So it's a question of justice for Europe. Now, what is funny is the application of the same equidistant principle in the open sea of the Indian Ocean. And what is also intriguing is the emphasis on this equidistance in a region where all lines negotiated so far, negotiated not through the court, ran parallel east. So if you look at the border between South Africa and Mozambique, it runs parallel east. The border between Tanzania and Mozambique, it runs parallel east. And there are also negotiations within that country so that certain territories that are traditionally within the domains of certain countries are respected. Now, our negotiation with Tanzania has taken into account Pemba and Zanzibar, so that because even if we insist on parallel east, as it is now, we'll get a chunk of Pemba, which is part of Zanzibar. If now Somalia insists on the equidistance, the principle internationally is that that principle will have to apply on all the boundaries in the Indian Ocean. So what the court will be doing, if it rules in favor of that, is open a Pandora's box of multiple, what you call domino effects of conflicts. Because Kenya then, in order to have the open sea, would require to insist on this principle in regard to Tanzania. What does that mean? We get the whole island of Pemba, from what I have done, and a portion of Zanzibar before we get to the 350 nautical miles into the sea. That means we retain our continental shelf and we retain our open shelf. But where does that leave us with our relationship with Tanzania, which is good so far?
That's the question.
Then Mozambique, you'll have to insist on that. Tanzania then may not want to deal with Kenya and insist on the same on Mozambique. And then we are all going to that way. The final country that will say no to this will be South Africa.
So we're actually seeing
a
long drawn out
the domino effect.
Yeah, the domino effect of that ruling, whatever is done, is going to be major. And it is no longer about Kenya alone. Kenya is insisting on a principle, but it's also insisting on something else. Negotiations so that we look at the peculiarities of our own boundaries, which the court may not have a universal principle to apply. So really, it's not a dispute between Kenya and Somalia in that sense.
In that sense.
It is a conflict of principles that need to be resolved and can better be resolved by negotiation between the two countries, not through the courts.
Not through the courts.
Because if
negotiation is actually the way to go.
Because the court is going to use what we call in legal terms the precedents. And the only precedents we have with this, what we're calling equidistance principle, is the Caspian Sea. And I have explained why these lines have to go that way, because the entrance to the sea, which kinds of open landlocked countries into the open seas, will itself, have to go that way in order to allow countries have access. Yeah, because if you insist on parallel east or parallel west, then it means a number of countries are not going to have anything other than big swimming pools outside there. What is called the shoreline is an extended swimming pool.
So we have a problem when it comes now to the issue of, for that matter, being on the horn of a dilemma, when it comes to issues of integration. Now we have a spirit of EAC that we're trying to integrate. We have, a common parliament amongst us. But now we can see, whichever way that this will go, and you say the avenue of a court is not the best way, let's negotiate. But if now Somalia insists that, yes, we want to use the courts, because we've argued here before, we said, that even the president of that particular court is from Somalia. So even maybe this particular judgment might be skewed towards Somalia. But in the spirit of integration right now, when we're talking about the East African community and the African Continental Free Trade Area as well, what is this portending for us as, a community?
Debal, I think from what has been explained, the best route for Somalia, or even Kenya, and for that matter, even Africa as a whole, is that this matter is negotiated outside the court. In fact, the protocol, the UN Charter itself, did not envision that this matter be in the domain of the court itself. If you look at the spirit of that charter, it was envisioning a mediation kind of process, because the court process is adversarial. That when we go there, we'll be going there as like enemies. So it's not going to help these countries. Somalia would be well advised, and Kenya is taking that route too, that let's take this matter out and talk about it in a more civil manner, because it has high emotions. For Somalia now, the stakes would be there, and the leadership would be looking back at the population, would be pushing them to say, you can't cede our land to Kenya. The same matter, the same way Kenya, and you can see the cascade. So the best way out is to bring this matter out. And I think this is a matter, that's what we said earlier on. Diplomacy now must be applied in all levels, using the two countries direct or other means, so that they can get out and talk to each other.
All right.
Yeah, but here is why really they must bring this case home to be negotiated. First of all, the AU principles, for a very long time, they've always asked African states to use existing channels within the continent to actually deal with these issues. Now, many gas and oil experts have said and are predicting that that area that you see there, that's the final, that's perhaps the final frontier or the final discoveries of major oil reserves globally are actually found there.
Major oil reserves globally.
The final discoveries are just there. Not the shaded line that is in dispute. That's part of it. So that whole region, from down Lamu all the way to Berbera. Yeah. And perhaps keeping a little bit, then going down to Sungu, southern parts of Tanzania to Beira, all the way down. So these are the final frontiers of major oil discoveries. Now, what does that mean? It means that the big boys are not going to allow African countries to actually touch this oil. We are talking some of the European countries that have been at this for a very long time, some of the countries in the Middle East that will think that if there is more oil here than there, then they must somehow make sure that this oil doesn't come, is not drilled, because it's going to also affect prices. And it means that these are the areas that is going to be, if the resources are going to be used well, will be far much more developed. But obviously, major oil companies in the world, which are Western, have a big eye on this. And this is why we said right from the beginning, this is an issue that it's not just an issue for Kenya and Somalia. I think African countries have got to take this very seriously so that we bring these issues home and discuss. Otherwise, major instability is on the way if we just allow external actors to interfere.
And are we facing maybe this particular agitation that we are in right now? Do you think in any way, from your own assessment, is being instigated by some of these external, actors as well? That someone is pushing the envelope through Somalia to make sure that we have this sort of dispute, escalating between Kenya and Somalia, that their foreign interest as it is?
I think the main issue here is who want Kenya and Somalia to have differences, and what are the reasons for that, and why would they get out of their way to finance Somalia's case in whatever. As you know, Somalia is just recovering from long wars, and we really appreciate what is happening in Mogadishu in terms of the economic gains that are being made, what the president, the the prime minister in that country are doing to bring back Somalia into the economic fold. But that said, Somalia cannot by itself afford such a protracted case like this one, which has gone on since 2014 and gone through 3 presidents. In a country which doesn't even have the historical memory in terms of the bureaucracy and the systems, and the systematic way that some of the things are being done. If you look at the depositions, what was deposited in these courts, Somalia posted over 5 volumes, each at 250 pages. Kenya only posted 1 volume of whatever case with 1,175 pages. I need to check my record. But it's 1 volume, which is smaller than 1 single volume of the Somali in the case. And when you read through, as I have done, through these volumes and see the articulation, even the language used can tell you where the lawyers are coming from. Even the language, because it's so queenly, it's so clear that you can know where they're coming from. Obviously, intelligence sources will tell you that it's true. Just try to read. They're on the ICJ website. It is not like it's something that is.
But we have learned Somalians who are in the diaspora as well. So maybe they can. Most of them were speaking the Queen's English.
No, not really. You understand. We went to the ICC and you saw the articulations, and we had the Queen's lawyers, whatever they're called. We know what. In scholarship, language speaks volume, because an Australian writing a document and a Canadian writing and a British, there are worlds of differences, you can tell. Anyway, the payment of it is traced from the Middle East, a country. The country paying for the case is traced from the Middle East, no names. Now, so as Dr. Mustafa rightly put it, they are geopolitical interests. And as early as 2004, it was published in the Journal of Foreign Affairs that the lands adjacent to the Rift Valley, where the Rift Valley cuts even across the Red Sea, coming through Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Mozambique, are going to be the largest frontier of oil discoveries in the world.
Oh, really?
And are going to have the largest, the largest. In fact, the author of the article argued that the problem is not the oil, is whether the region has the governance capacity to manage that kind of wealth. That was the question that was raised. And he gave statistics, including the wealth that is going to accrue to the region by 2015, because he was writing 2004, 2005. Now, I shared that concern at that time. And I think what we are now seeing here is the incapacity of Somali government, the incapacity of the Kenyan government, or the Kenya elite and the Somali elite to know that first and foremost they are Africans who need to manage their wealth. That wealth, if it is tapped whether by Kenya or by Somalia, is going to benefit the African people of the East Coast, particularly between the Ruvuma, Tanzania, and Beira, you know, that kind of area. So I think that's why the whole question of negotiation becomes so important, because we're going to have so many other things happening in this ocean, given this frontier. The Middle East people are concerned that we are going now to overturn the global oil hegemons, Saudi Arabia, the Emiratis, the Bahrainians and all. Because the argument, and I have no scientific proof for this, you can check, no scientific proof at all, is that much of this oil, because of the slanting of the ground under the waters, is going to flow into this region. There is that fear.
Flowing into our region?
Into our region.
From Somalia?
No, not from Somalia. It's from the Middle East. From
the Middle East?
Yes. And as a result, you see also the sea has valleys and hills and so on under the sea. The flow, the lay of the land under the sea is such that there is fear. Just like between Nigeria and Chad, there is the fear that the oil from Nigeria is flowing into, and the explanation is given about the
Iraq and Kuwait.
Iraq and Kuwait. The war between Iraq and Kuwait was the fact that the Iraqi oil was flowing into the Kuwait wells. So you can see, these are scientific arguments or speculations based now on seismic surveys. But when we come to the ground, we don't know how that is going. So there are serious power questions regarding to the control of oil. Remember, Saudi Arabia and the Middle East powers, together with their Western European partners, are controlling the oil industry globally. Now, if this region discovers, that is exploit the oil as now discovered in the entire of the region as explained, all the way from the top, the Cape of Guandafui, all the way up to the lower parts of Mozambique. Oil and gas, if it's exploited, then we are seeing a region that will be the wealthiest in the world.
Wealthiest in the world. But also there has been a controversy on the viability of the oil that is coming, especially from our region. Even the Turkana oil, people are questioning the commercial viability of it, that it doesn't meet the threshold, the standard threshold as far as international standards are concerned. I don't know. Maybe, Mustafa, you can also weigh in on this.
Well, no, I saw that we're going to be putting out 70,000 barrels a day. Compare that to what Saudi Arabia is putting out, 11 million barrels per day, and therefore, and that the fact that Tala Oil has spent over 200 billion Kenyan shillings and will spend another 300 billion Kenyan shillings. There are calculations there that I don't really understand, but what is important here is what Professor Kagonja is explaining, and to put confirmed statistics to that, to have that in a whole picture, is oil in Saudi Arabia is going to run out in 52 years time.
Yeah.
Oil in Qatar is going to in fact it's decreasing. It's the gas that is the reserve that is going to last about 84 years, but oil is going to take less time. In the UAE, in 65 years there'll be no more if they continue to pump out, and if there are no new reserves to be discovered in 65 years, there'll be no more oil to actually pump out. In Oman, the oil has already come down. In Bahrain has reached its peak already. That's why it diversified into financial institutions. Bahrain will be a net importer of oil in about 15 years' time. So this is a resource that is going to be finished. And there are new frontiers of oil. And perhaps maybe this is what is causing the problem, because these are new frontiers of oil discoveries that will last. We don't know how long they're going to last. Turkana is a little bit off. Maybe they need to do more work. I'm not sure. Turkana is in the Rift Valley.
That's inland. That is offshore.
That's right. But it's the offshore.
That's where the focus is.
It's the offshore, right from the Guadafui down to Beira. That's where all eyes are on.
So we explore a bit as also, because I see, for the interest of time, we won't even have time to discuss Ethiopia a bit. So let's just drill deeper with this, and then we can pick up on Ethiopia also next week, because I think that will be a developing, or it is a developing story as it is right now. But let's say from Erastus Moincha briefly, when we see this geopolitics and we see Sparmajo, many people saying that he's actually allied to, you know, the United States, and the other factions of Somali government allied to, you know, the Middle East as well. Are we seeing a government that they have vested interest from without, and the key stabilizing figure also is leaning towards one part? What does it portend then for, in terms of when you're talking about negotiations? Because if we come to the negotiating table and we know what fortunes is about to befall us, we're bound to have a lose-lose sort of a situation, not a win-win. Or if it's a win-win, how do you then split? I don't know. I'm not an expert on the negotiations, but now you can tell us what are we facing in terms of geopolitics and the negotiation split.
Yeah, well, I think what Mustafa and Peter have said, if you look at the geopolitics of Somalia and Kenya and the Horn of Africa as a whole, there is very clear interest, particularly from the Middle East, which have always complicated. We know that even in our neighborhood, the role that Saudi Arabia and the others have been playing, and all these big players from the Middle East, is increasingly becoming quite phenomenal. And so you cannot just write it out. And of course, as you rightly mentioned, there is also the Western interests in the region, which, as you can see, when the crisis that is in the Middle East is partly related to resources. Right now, the intention of Americans to tame Iran is under the guise that, okay, we want to safeguard that passage, the Gulf of what?
The Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, Hormuz, so that international trade can take place. And what are you talking about? It's oil. The countries that are importing so that they can pass. So the oil, you know, economics of oil is still big because we have not found alternative sources of energy that can replace it, although it's a wasting asset and people know. So when you see a region that is going to become a major source of this commodity, obviously you cannot rule out those that will destabilize that. So your second question was, if you go to negotiations, who are you going to be talking to? I think what Peter was alluding to, if you see a dog that is behaving in a certain manner, or if you see a behavior, you have to check who's the owner, who is going to be behind all this. And so we need now to go behind and say, who is behind all this? And those are the people, perhaps then we want to check what are their motives. And I would not rule out the fact that if they see this region is positioning itself to be quite a powerful, and you can see there is tension, they know that China may be coming in, Russia would be coming in. So make it ungovernable, make it difficult for anything to happen so that we stay put. It's not that they didn't know that this oil was here all this time. They know it, and I'm sure they can see it. But why have we not exploited it? Because they wanted to make sure that they will be the ones to come and position themselves to be able to be the ones to exploit it.
Right, right. Well, we're just about to wind up. Maybe Peter Kagwanji, can you give us your final remarks as we're winding up? Yes.
Two questions, two issues. Yes. One is what Honorable Mwenja has just put here on the table, that the owner of the dog in the Middle East is essentially the multinational giants. And therefore, you cannot ignore. And the multinational giants, oil giants, are in cahoots with certain powers in the Middle East. And that is no longer theoretical. You can look at it that way. The third actor who have the second issue is, of course, the role of the Arab League. It was very, very intriguing to see the Arab Parliament commenting on this matter and leaning very closely on the side of Somalia, which I mean, the land itself, if we are talking about Muslims, the land we are talking about is in the hands of Kenyan Muslims. So these are Kenyan Muslims. So you are disinheriting one Muslim or in favor of another. What logic is that, if that is the line to go? So the issue is neither Muslim versus Christian, because this is what they are trying to bring into issue. It's Muslim versus Muslim in terms of the territory. And therefore, we need to be a little bit careful. But my conclusion simply is, the court has no business in this case. The Somali and the Kenyan elite must sit. They must activate diplomacy. Whatever the court would want to decide, whatever the ruling would come from the court, ultimately, the China-Philippine case is the one that we're going to determine.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Dr. Mustafa, also your headline thoughts.
In 1953, the government of Iran, a democratically elected government led by Mohammad Mossadegh, was deposed by agents from the West because he nationalized oil in Iran, and they had to get him out. There have been regime changes in the Middle East, including in Iraq, because of oil. The West is not going to sleep. They will interfere with this issue of the oil blocks, and it's up to the African countries to stand up to the West and whoever else is trying to interfere with the exploration and drilling of oil.
Ambassador Erastus.
Well, I think it's all said. What it will mean is that Kenya now in the diplomatic channels may have to use all available means, strict bilateral, use African Union, use all other friends, and even go to Middle East and start talking to those countries for the need to avoid this escalation, because as you see, this thing is bigger than the two countries, it's global, and if we don't manage it, we'll be in a war, in a long drawn-out crisis that will affect both countries, and as you rightly mentioned, it will be a lose-lose situation.
It should be a lose-lose situation.